just a quick intro. I'm Karuna. I'm the founder and executive director of Mind Oasis. Most of you know that, but we actually use these webinars for my podcast, which is called Tea, Talk, and Truth with Karuna, Meditation Happy Hour. So let's just take a moment to arrive together. And of course, you're always welcome to have your eyes open or closed, but if you'd like to close your eyes, we're just going to check in with our body and our emotions and see how we're feeling tonight. If there's any wiggles that would feel good, you know, sometimes we have to move in order to actually find stillness. And then I'll encourage you to take 3 cleansing breaths. And if you have a stuffy nose, you can always modify, please. So just in through the nose. And exhale through the mouth. 2 more. Inhale through the nose. And an exhale through the mouth. And maybe even an audible, it's the end of the day sigh on this one. Inhale through the nose. And then we'll just take a moment here to feel our bodies. Notice the connection between your sits bones and the surface that you're seated on. Feel the crown of your head extending towards the sky. Maybe it even uplifts your spine just a little bit. And then a little tuck of the chin. And take a moment to place your hands with intention in some way. Palms down for grounding, up for a little bit of uplifting if you're feeling drowsy or sleepy. And then noticing just for a moment if there's any part of you that's feeling tense. I'll give you a few usual suspects. Your jaw, noticing if your jaw is clenched. Is there tension in the back of your neck? Clenching of the hips. And then see if there is the possibility of not really trying to change anything, just a noticing. It's very difficult to do as humans. We want to fix everything. And then take a peek at how you're feeling emotionally this evening. How is your heart space? And just noticing what's there. And it's okay, no matter what it is. It's okay. Maybe taking a breath or 2. And then I like to pretend I'm a spelunker. And I take a light and shine around inside my body to see if there's any other underlying emotion there. So as if I'm exploring a cave, is there something else kind of hidden in the corner? And then just taking another one of those nice cleansing breaths and beginning to wiggle fingers and toes and blinking open your eyes. If there was anything there, either in your body or in your emotions, that you just want to have seen, sometimes it takes the power away from stuff as it comes up, is really for you to just see it and feel it. You might just jot it down on a piece of paper. Oftentimes I will find that even if I'm feeling joyful, hi Pirat, even if I'm feeling joyful, that there is an element of anxiety or fear. And a lot of times for me, anger. That is my flavor of choice. But see, I know that. And I'm not ashamed of it. I lived, I think until I was 39, being ashamed and feeling guilt around how angry I was. And, you know, we could do the whole thing where, well, you're not anger. You just feel anger. And that's fine. That's really good speak. But anyone who knows me knows that I'm more interested in one's experience, in my experience, the truth of my experience, than sugarcoating the way that I say it. So from the time I was like 10 until the time I was 39 or so, I was really ashamed of my anger. And I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about how angry I was. And then I went to a really good therapist who also happens to be Kelly Lindsay, so one of my good meditation teachers and all that jazz. And she said, what's on the other side of anger? And I thought, well, what the hell? I don't know. What's on the other side of anger? What a strange question. And on the other side of anger is clarity. Because there's a reason you feel something. So whatever you're feeling right now, and you might not be feeling anything. You might be just like, I don't know, I worked all day and now I'm just here seeing what we're going to explore. See, but when you're feeling something, which we all are often these days, unless I think most of us are feeling big things. So you can look at the wisdom behind the emotion and you can just drop the guilt. So here's your full boogie permission. Just drop it. You feel the way you feel for a reason. That anger led to the clarity that I am an extremely loyal person to the people I care about. I am loyal to the earth. There are things that I stand for, which makes me passionate. Now, if you're going, are we going to talk only about you? I use these examples because I only know my own experience, and I share my experience to give you full court permission to explore your experience. So if you're younger than 39, then maybe I can save you a few years. And if you're older, well, now forget it, just drop it. You don't have to feel shame and guilt about who you are. You can embrace it. Now, does that mean that I should go around being angry towards people? No. That's where the wisdom comes in, right? So backing up to the beginning, I think I named this webinar Leaning into Uncertainty and Change. And those of you who have attended a webinar or a class with me before know that I usually will say something to the effect of, just in case I die before the end, I think I slated 75 minutes this time because I didn't think I could do it in 60. But if I croak, I want to give you the punchline. So how do you lean into uncertainty and change? Okay. And I wrote down as I was preparing today that the punchline is this: impermanence. Impermanence is the punchline. And we're going to get into what impermanence really means, how it's playing out in your life, whether you're aware of it or not, which for most of us, we aren't. I wasn't for a very long time. And then how impermanence actually is this massive portal into the opportunity for a big life, a big wholesome life. And I mean wholesome, like organic, real, not, I don't mean necessarily like goody two shoes, because I'm not a goody two shoes girl at all. I want to be sure that when you leave here today, that I've put you into a place where the opportunity is there for you to relax. In other words, you have to do the relaxing part, but I'd like to give you that opportunity. I'd like to give you the opportunity to leave not wound up, but rather to actually have leaned into uncertainty and change, and to feel like, oh, I'm armed with a few new tools for everything that's going on. And to feel good. And then maybe put your piece of paper away for the night, maybe go for a walk or put your feet into a little bit of water. Or if you're not going outside right now, you could even just take a little shower or a bath. Do something sweet for yourself. Because what I'm going to share with you is actually, to me, a pretty high level teaching, but I'm going to try to break it down in such a way that it's really applicable to anyone's life. So if you feel a little stirred up tonight, is my whole point, do the things that are grounding. A nice slow walk. This is not for exercise. This is not going out and running. This is walking, enjoying the air on your skin, taking a bath, doing the, looking out at the stars. Maybe you'll see Neowise tonight, something like that, okay? It's not the night to pick a fight with a partner, okay? Or any other person in your life that you like to pick fights with. That just happens to be my preferred tango partner. Oh, Lacey, hang on one second. I'm gonna let Lacey in here. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to blah blah at you for a little while, and then we'll do a Q&A so that you can ask your questions, so you can move back into your thinking mind. But then I'd like to leave you in your heart mind, which is here. Hi, Lacey. Right? So this is your heart mind. And your heart mind has many things to tell you that, in my opinion, might be more beneficial during this time than the things your thinking mind. So the thinking mind, to me, is the one that gets you at about 3 a.m. And by 5 a.m., you're homeless. That one, that's the thinking mind, okay? That's not what we're going for. The heart mind is the one that when you're out in nature and you feel that connection, or if you are more of like a family person and you just feel this strong love for grandchildren, children, partners, or if you're a person who really enjoys community and music and things like that, it's that feeling, and you can just, right? It's this feeling that you get in your heart space when you're inspired. That space has a lot to tell you. So in any teaching that I give, I try to also give you tangible things you can do immediately in your life to connect with that heart-mind space. And I was thinking about this on my run today. Some of them include gazing at the blue sky. Sky gazing is a very high practice, and also staring out into the stars. I'm hoping we're going to get there. There's one thing, an exercise I'd like to do with you. And the reason is because it begins to, when we're really in uncertainty and change and grief and despair and depression and confusion and anger and all fear, those are big emotions when they're overt. And it kind of feels like things are closing in on you. It's like, well, what are you going to do? You can end up feeling almost like an animal trapped against a wall. And if you've ever seen an animal like that, they're so afraid and they just don't know what to do. Well, we're humans, luckily, right? And so we have the ability to open up the scope. And sometimes opening up the scope is feeling the air on your skin. So one of the things that we can all do when things get rough, when we're faced with uncertainty, when we're faced with change, is to go through body scans like what you go through in community meditation, right? You can just start at the crown of your head, work your way down to your feet. I actually prefer to go that direction because it's grounding. Go through the senses of your body: vision, smell, taste. I'm actually giving it to you in the order I prefer. Hearing, then moving into the air on your skin. And even if your eyes are closed, for example, you still have a field of vision. You'll find light dancing. So if you've ever gone through those exercises with us on community meditation, you've gone, why the hell do I come to meditation and people are telling me to listen to things? It's a way to get you out of thinking mind and into your body, the felt sensation of your experience. Anytime that you're feeling closed in, if you can open up your scope, even just a little bit, just like pinky toe through the door of a little slot of a scope, it can start to crack the sensation, the feeling like this is how it's always going to be. Does anyone kind of feel like this is how it's always going to be at this point with like the pandemic? And yeah. So that's what we're going to actually talk about, is how nothing ever can always be. And that is extremely disorienting for humans. And it is the big stinking ball of opportunity that's right in front of us. And I guess I want to give the hazard label, the warning label, the police line, do not cross. In no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that you don't feel exactly what you're feeling or experience exactly what you're experiencing. You are never going to get me to say things like love and light and positivity. I think it's fine if you believe in that stuff, and that's totally cool. So I'm not wrapping it. But what I am saying is that I try to share teachings with you that I feel are even more helpful than that. Please feel love. Please lean into light. Please be positive if that's helpful for you. But then move just one step further into this place of wisdom, where we start to look at the world as it is, not as we wish it would be. So that's my warning label. Impermanence is the punchline. Resistance is futile. If we are all old enough here, I'm sure of it. Let me see. Yep, we're all old enough here to know that what one resists persists. Don't think of a pink elephant. I mean, it's so crazy. Like, don't think of a pink elephant. And then you're like, Jesus, all I can think about is a pink elephant at this point, right? It's a simple, silly example, but it's true, and you can apply it to everything. So in our political climate in this country, everyone is resisting everyone else's truth. And it's just one big ball of wax. And the possibility for actually being able to hear other people is when you can, again, open the scope a little bit and try not to resist quite so much. This is not, and I always have to give 2 warning labels. Number 1, if you ever hear something that comes out of my mouth that you're like, I do not agree with that. Great, good, perfect. Critical thinking always. So put it on a shelf and say, well, I don't believe that, but it's an interesting concept and maybe I'll just leave it there for now. And the second thing is none of what I share with you is ever meant to say that one should be a doormat. Please vote. Please do the right thing. Be kind. But just understand that in addition to your duty as a citizen in this country, a citizen of this world, there's also, in my opinion, an obligation to lean into compassion, empathy, loving kindness, generosity, and they aren't less important than the things you've been told since you were 5 years old in kindergarten are important. So at a very young age, at least in my experience, I was born in 75. From a very young age, you know, I was taught to pledge allegiance. I was taught to stand up for the flag. I was taught a whole bunch of those types of things in school. And that's fine. But I don't exactly remember being taught how important it is to be generous and kind and empathetic and compassionate. These were lessons I learned, for example, in church. They were lessons perhaps my mom and dad taught me. But moving towards like 12th grade, there's this expectation that if you do well in school, if you get into a good school, if you land that job, if you get that partner, that is what's going to bring you happiness. And because we've all lived long enough to know that the partner sometimes leaves, the job isn't as great as it seemed, the education, how many of us besides me have a $40,000 education that like I don't even use, I don't even come close to using? So like life is changing all the time. And I think that one of the gifts of Mind Oasis, but also other platforms where there are people who are looking at old teachings. So the teaching I'm going to share with you today is from the Buddha. I guess my standard quote about that is, nobody's here trying to make anybody a Buddhist. Okay. Just happens that I study Tibetan Buddhism. And so this teaching is from the Buddha. And I find it useful. And I hope that you do too. So resistance is futile. So what's the actual source of our suffering? Is it the pandemic? Good. So I'm going to suggest that the source of our suffering is slightly different. And I'm going to give you 3 lenses by which to take a peek and report back. Please really connect with me and let me know what you think. So the Buddha woke up, right? And to keep it sort of simple, the Buddha had spent many years like doing all sorts of practices down to like basically starving himself to try to wake up. And I'm just going to let you guys decide what you think that means for you. Like, what would it mean to live a completely woke up life where everything is paradise and you see everyone as paradise? So sort of a different lens than we see, or I don't know who you are, but it's a different lens than what I see in my world. And so you would think like he'd wake up and he might say something like, wow, life is awesome. But instead he wakes up and the first thing that the first teaching he gives is life is suffering. And this is where 90% of the room runs. I almost called this webinar, the gift, the gift of suffering. But then I realized no one would come. So I had to like kind of slightly tweak it, just so that folks would like entertain the idea. So he wakes up and he says, life is suffering. And we all go, well, gosh, that's not very inspiring. But then he says it's caused. And the cool thing about something being caused is that it means it can change. It can be uncaused. It can be shifted. It can be transmuted. It can be transformed. It can be changed. And then he says, there's a way out of the suffering. Holy cow, things are starting to look better. So by step 3, like I always call it the Good News Bible. I used to have this denim Good News Bible that I think I got when I had my first communion. And I loved it because I just loved the denim on it. And I thought it was so cool. So by step 3, we're in denim. Okay, so there's something we can do about it. And then he suggests there's various paths. And many of us are on that kind of path, whether you're a Christian or if you're Jewish or if you don't identify with a religion, but you're on a spiritual path, or if you're just spiritual curious, like, I don't know if I want to be on a path. It sounds kind of woo. Whatever that means for you. But if you're here, you probably are feeling into something. And that's what the Buddha really says. Start paying attention. Start paying attention to the way you act. And then start paying attention to the people around you and how they act. And start seeing what kind of seeds you want to plant in your life. What do you want to grow around you in your life? So going back to suffering, the first kind of suffering is the suffering of suffering. And this is sort of what we all experience and know really well. Whether you like to think about it or not, I do a lot. Because we are born, we will die. And again, I did say this was going to be a gentle teaching, so I'll try to take it easy here. But, you know, we've lived long enough to have experienced someone we love dying, whether it's a grandparent or a parent or a friend, right? And so we're here on earth to work something out. And between those 2 points, a lot of things happen. We've also been in partnerships with people that we absolutely loved. This could be romantic or otherwise. Friends that we just loved and adored. And by the time we were done with them and parted, we couldn't stand. Some of us have been through divorces. So the suffering of suffering is just simply that things happen in life and then they change. You die, you live, things happen in between. It's the suffering of suffering. So the second suffering is the suffering of change itself. Everything you have, you will lose. I know. I promised it would be gentle and I'm getting there. I promise. You just got to hang in there. But hey, do you want to lean into uncertainty and find some access points for maybe just a little bit of healing salve on your heart? Or do you want to just hear the same old thing? I mean, that's totally up to you. So I think a good example of this is like you get the brand new car. And the brand new car is so shiny and fun and it's kind of zippy, you know, like the old car was kind of slowing down. Or you can use a computer as an example, like you get a brand new computer, it's super zippy. And then like 2 months later, it's kind of a little bit slower. And then like 2 years later, you're like, God, that thing's a piece of crap. I've got to start all over again. If you really start to look around you or in the mirror at the things that are breaking down, that's the suffering of change. Now, is change itself suffering? No, because what if you used to run an 8-minute mile and now you can run a 6-minute mile and that's important to you? That change was great. You're happy. You're like, oh my gosh, wow, I got really zippy. Or you're in a crappy job and you get the good job. So change in and of itself isn't suffering. In fact, change is the source that we're going to lean into to get a little healing salve in the heart. But the way we view it, and if you can really hear me on this, because it's kind of the critical point, we think things aren't going to change. So our relationship to everything in our life, in a sense, is false. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. When I'll talk about me. When I get upset about XYZ, I'm placing an upsettedness on a shifting object. So which part of this am I really getting upset about? Because it's going to change. And we're kind of doing this all day long. We're applying like, don't like, want, don't want on completely shifting objects. And then when the shift happens, so let's use the partner example. Gosh, I really, really, really love this person. I want him to be my husband. Now he's my husband. Oh my gosh, he does XYZ. It makes me absolutely crazy. Oh, I don't think I love him quite as much. We've applied all of these emotions on something that was always going to change. So that's the suffering of change. And then the third type of suffering is called all-pervasive suffering. Sorry, guys. Okay, so all-pervasive suffering, this is the one that's less overt, right? So you can see that, like, because you're born, you have to die. Because you were young and, you know, all fit and blah, 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 you know, then things start to go a little downhill. There's no one that looks like they were 16 when they're 86. No one. And then whatever things are important to you. So like, if you're like, I don't give a shit about like what I look like, fine. Find something you care about that has shifted like that. Everything you have, you lose. Well, that's kind of obvious. It's not fun to talk about. And I wouldn't suggest you just run around and tell people, did you know that everything you love, you're going to lose? Because no one will be your friend anymore. Nobody likes a wet blanket. But the all-pervasive suffering is a little bit more discreet. And the example I like to use, and actually it was the inspiration for this webinar, is that I have a really beautiful tree outside of my window when I meditate. It's a big pine, and it's just gorgeous. And I've applied this label of love to this tree. And yet I know that that tree is suffering. Not suffering in the sense of there isn't something wrong with the tree, but like the world, or like our experience in the world, there is a flavor of suffering to that tree. And this is the one that's you may have to cook. Because at some point, the relationship between the tree and me ends. It ends. It runs out. It is no more. And that's how this world works. So backing up, because that's way too deep and not particularly fun to think about, what the hell does this have to do with where we are as a world right now, with a pandemic, with social unrest? Because around March 15th, let's say March 13th, we were like, wow, China's really having a big problem. Happy it's not here. And by like March 15th, it was here. And our whole world had shifted. The change happened in a big way. It wasn't the car slowly breaking down. It wasn't the lover leaving and then, you know, going through the 7 stages of grief or however many cycles there are these days. It was a massive shock to our systems. And I would posit that we're still there. Because the first part of the shock was, oh my gosh, everything changed. And then we all kind of hunkered in, and maybe you had COVID, maybe you didn't. That's not really exactly what I'm talking about. It's more so, it's a little bit more global. So the shock happened, and then we were like, okay, well, I guess we'll hunker in for a while. And then we hunkered in for a while and then realized, oh my gosh, it's really hard to be in your house with like no escape from whoever it was in your house, whether it's partners, pets, children, or yourself. And then infighting started happening. Masks, no masks. Go out, stay in. And then politics got involved because they have to. And then we started looking around and going, oh my gosh, this isn't going away. And I think that's about where we are. This is not going away. So we're sort of in this like bizarre acceptance of things aren't going back to normal. And then we cheer ourselves up maybe a little bit with that, saying, well, there is a lot of normal that we don't want to go back to. And that's true, too. But aren't there some normal things you'd like? Like, I know a couple of you are parents here. Wouldn't it be nice to just be able to send your child back to school and not have anything other than the decision like crayons or markers? Or like the economic uncertainty of being unemployed or underemployed? So what's the access point in any of that? And to me, the access point is first understanding that it had to change. There was no choice but for the world to change. And it's going to change again. And it's going to change again. One of the examples that I use is that my mom died when I was 25. I was making breakfast for my son in her kitchen, and I got a phone call. 30 minutes prior, she had beeped the horn on her motorcycle. Young, healthy, going off to work. She was a nurse for the mentally ill and homeless. Going off to work, see you later. And 30 minutes later, my mom had died. And nothing in that morning would have indicated to me that the world was about to change like that. January 1st, everybody's making their New Year's resolutions or their intentions in 2020. March 15th, the entire world changes. And we look at one another and we say, how could this have happened? And what I'm suggesting that can be really helpful to understand is, how could it not have happened? Because it takes one layer of complexity out of this really complex ball of yarn that we're coping with as humans. How could this have happened? That question, when you can begin to shelve it, it comes back, or at least does for me. When that can start to get shelved, then you have, and you notice where my hands are, then in your heart mind space, you have something else that's possible. How can I be useful to myself and to others? I'm not saying picking up knitting, okay? So I'm not talking about a self-improvement project. But what were those qualities that I was talking about that I feel like aren't cultivated in our culture? Generosity. How can we be generous to ourselves first? I'm feeling depressed. I'm going to allow myself to feel depressed. Boom. I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling anger, and I'm not going to feel guilt and shame about it. So letting yourself off the hook is one. Then, how do you extend that to the people in your life who seem like numbnuts right now? I mean, unless it's just my experience. There's a lot of people that I love that I'm just like, what are you doing right now? You don't have to agree with them, but can you extend that same generosity to the people around you that you're extending to yourself? Well, they're probably feeling traumatized and they probably don't know what to do. You don't excuse it. No excuse for bad behavior. But what if you can just create a little bit of space, a little crack where you go, I'm just going to shelve them for a minute. And then what about loving kindness? What about, instead of the reactive, which I feel all the time, the reactive, I don't know how those numbnuts could possibly feel that way. What if that's not the right question? What if the better, more useful, kind thing to do is to extend loving kindness and wisdom to them? May they find wisdom, please, sooner than later. What feels better in your heart? So you can take this for a test spin. Anytime I'm all judgy McJudgy pants, it doesn't feel good. We already don't feel good. The nervous system is already hijacked. What are the practices that can help us feel good in our heart space? Compassion. Compassion for the human experience. We are all experiencing these three sufferings together, and most people are asleep at the wheel. How can that actually invoke compassion for them? So one of the things you can do, especially with anxiety, right, where do you feel anxiety typically? In your heart space. It's all crunched up, right? Is to begin to extend loving kindness. And anytime you can open up that myopic scope, like, you're like this, you're like, I can't, the world's falling apart. Everyone I love is an idiot. What is going on? Okay. Acknowledge that's how you feel. Good. Couple of breaths. Open up the scope, maybe go for a walk, take a peek at the sky. Okay, I'm feeling a little better prepared for this world that's kind of crazy. Now, what can I do? Okay, I can't work with the big Boomba numbnut, but there is that person who said that one thing, and I know that they're probably just having a hard time. And then you say to yourself, geez, have I ever had a hard time? Yeah. Oh, compassion. Okay. And then finally, I would say empathy. Next to critical thinking, I feel like this is the single most thing lacking in our society right now. The lack of critical thinking makes me really question what the hell is being taught in schools right now. I have to say, I'm not saying that about teachers. I'm just saying, like, what is being taught in school? Because critical thinking seems to have gone right out the door. And then two, what about empathy? Empathy is a very potent way to move out of judgy McJudgy pants into something useful. So one of Kelly Lindsay's best things she's ever shared with me is, before you open your mouth, is it helpful and is it kind? And if it's not either, perhaps this is a time where that's not the appropriate response. Somebody's snatching your kid in Walmart, you are not going to be helpful and kind. You're going to grab your kid back and you're going to call the police, right? So you have to place wisdom and logic into all of this. But if it's just a pissing match to be right, which usually it is it helpful and is it kind? And is it going to feel better later? Like, or are you going to have to go apologize? Ugh. So it's kind of a preventative medicine. So RAIN stands for, the R is recognize. So if you are in the middle of a mental affliction fireworks show, Everything's going off. Depression, fear, anxiety, you're pissed, whatever it is for you, your perfect flavor. If you have that 1 second of wisdom to say, okay, wait, I might be flying off the handle. Which, by the way, how do you get that 1 second? By having a meditation practice. It creates space between your reaction and what's going on. So here's your second tool. If you don't have a really strong meditation practice, please come to community meditation at least once a week, and then make sure you're meditating each day for like 10 minutes, and then take 1 day off a week and go stare at the sky and go do other things. But really, 10 minutes a day. You have 10 minutes a day. Also, I recently took Facebook off of my phone, and it's been amazing. I am feeling so much better, and I have a lot more time in my life, so I would recommend that. Or whatever it is for you, TikTok. Recognize what is happening. What's happening, right? I'm in the middle of this mental affliction. What's happening? Well, I'm in the middle of a mental affliction. That's really all that's happening. And I've attached to something that's going to change. Really hear this. This is the critical piece. This is the access point, in case I didn't say it really clearly. You are attaching whatever you're feeling to something that's going to change. That is extremely good news. Picture the Good News Bible with the denim cover. You're attaching to something that's going to change. The pandemic is going to change. The social injustice is going to change. It might not change for the better, it might not change for the worse, but it's going to change. So work with what's really happening, which is something that is not, it's a moving object. And allow that to create a little more space to go, okay, well, attaching to something that's going to change anyway, maybe that's, A is for allow the experience to be there just as it is. I feel like this should come with like a double black diamond warning. I don't think this is easy. I think this is really edgy. I don't think it's schmaltzy. I think it's actually really hard to do. And if you made this your practice for the rest of your life, it would be enough, in my opinion. Investigate with interest and care. So what if angry Karuna had just looked at anger and gone, well, of course I'm angry. I feel strongly. I feel loyal to the people I love. That will never go away. It could have provided this wisdom. I had to have someone else tell it to me. So this is something that you can do on your own. You can say, well, why is it that I'm feeling depressed? Gee, could it be because you deeply care about other beings and you see them hurting? What did someone say? The lack of unity? How could you not be depressed? How could you not feel depressed? And then nurture with self-compassion. Be okay with feeling. I posted on my wall, I asked, how are you like feeling during this pandemic? And, you know, I had people depressed and sad and confused and all of the things you would expect. And I had 3 people, one person say nothing. One person say nonchalant, it isn't affecting me. And someone else with a very similar flavor. And I thought, oh boy. If you're feeling you're living your life, it means you care about other people and it means you care about you. That is an extremely good sign. So whatever it is you're feeling, love on it. I like the advices of talking to it like you would talk to a baby or a puppy. And if that feels too soft and gentle for you, even I do it. You know? Yeah. Life is rough, man. Don't add more roughness within. Be sweet to yourself. How would you talk to your best friend? Even if they screwed up, wouldn't you be like, oh, honey, it's okay. That's the voice. That's the voice we're going for.
Well, I just thought something that was, I mean, it's more of a comment than a question, but something I thought really interesting while you were talking is people who are not on the spectrum may not know this, but no one hates change more than someone on the autistic spectrum. Trust me. So I find it really funny and actually really interesting, and actually made my heart space really happy, because as you were talking about like the 3 stages of suffering and the compassion, kindness, and empathy, and things like that, I always say that I am the adult I am because I was well trained as a child. And it's funny because those were all the things like they really drilled in, like when I was in the 80s, and they were like training us like weird kids. Like that's what they taught us, was like everything's gonna change, just suck it up. And like the 3 emotions they started with trying to connect us to, was in order so we could assimilate, was compassion, empathy, because those help you learn how to deal with other people how they want to be dealt with. And then you learn to recognize the other ones, because usually you have anger, and that's a neurodiverse thing we got. But so I just thought it was really interesting, because it sort of made me feel like with all of this stuff going on, where I feel like I'm so ill-equipped to handle any of it, I was like, wait, I kind of came with like a bonus package. They taught me this already. Yeah. Like,
oh my gosh.
So I was like, wait a minute, this isn't scary. I know this. Like, I still hate change, but
yeah, well, but that's so lovely, because we all actually, in a sense, hate change. It's really hard. It's really hard on our bodies. It's hard on our minds. It's hard on our spirit. It's hard on our soul. And then so many of us aren't well equipped, and we don't quite know what to do with that. Anyone else have anything they want to share? That was so beautiful, Kim. Thank you.
I think we
resist
often,
it.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I resist that change and make it harder on myself.
That phrase, whatever we resist persists, has really saved me more than one time. When I really feel the resistance, I'm like, okay, I got to take a peek at it. And again, this is where a meditation practice really is helpful, right? A formal meditation practice. I'm not talking about gardening and running and all of the other things we do, which is wonderful. And yes, the flow state occurs there, which is really important. But there is something, in my opinion, about a formal meditation practice that really helps in the creating of the space when things happen. And that's been my experience over the past decade or so. Pierrette, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, when we talk about how can I be useful, I think we so often forget to extend it to self first. You know, that's, you know, we think, oh, I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to call so-and-so. And then you get all in the tizzy, not useful to anybody. And it's because we haven't taken the time, or at least I haven't taken the time to take care of self first.
Yeah. And that's that example in the airplane when, you know, you put your mask on yourself first, because, you know, if you're going to pass out, you're not going to be useful. And it's kind of a goofy metaphor, but I think it's actually a very useful metaphor for those of us who are doers and caregivers and take care of everyone else, and then leave ourselves depleted. Lacey?
Hi everyone. I was just going to share that it's been really interesting. I have 2 children. One is 12 and one is 9. And, you know, we've been sheltering at home for 4 months. And I've really tried to be very intentional about our time together. And like Karuna, I've studied some Tibetan Buddhism, and we've gone on retreat together. And I've looked at it kind of like from the mind space of an actual retreat with intention. But it's been interesting to see, you know, to hold that space not only for myself, but for my children, and also to be able to speak into those really uncomfortable things that they're going through, and really hold space and have compassion and empathy for the deep suffering that change it brings, especially at those ages. And one practice that we've been using a lot in our family comes from Kristen Neff, which she's teaches self-compassion, but then it has a little edgy flavor that I think you'll appreciate, Karuna, from, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Glennon Doyle and her book Untamed. And so it's this ability to say, you know, put your hand on your heart and say, this is really hard for me right now. And I think we bypass that as humans. It's like we want to just go into doing or, you know, whatever. And it's like taking that moment to say, it's really hard for me, and then breathing there for a second. And then, you know, but I can do hard things. And that's something that has been really powerful and helpful, not only for myself, but especially like my 12-year-old who is, she's, you know, growing up, and social life is big right now. And, you know, hormones and mental changes and all these different kinds of things. It's been empowering, you know, to also, say, what can you do about this? How can you be the change that you want to see, and empower them in their suffering? Anyway, that's it.
Lacey, say it one more time. You put your hand over your heart and you say,
this is really hard for me right now. And then you breathe it. And you like feel in your body where it hurts. Where is it hard? And you wait there for a minute, and then you say, but I can do hard things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll leave it right there. So let's take a good seat. And if that is lying down, I will not go over, I promise. But I want you to relax as much as you can. It's a terrible meditation instruction. It really is, but try. Just for tonight. Yeah, and actually place a hand over your heart if that feels good for you. And just first feel the physical sensation of the beating of your heart. Reminding you that you are alive. No matter what's going on. And then lately I've been really liking to feel also the energetic sensation in your heart space, right? I mean, the heart is charged. So just see if you can feel that. And then beginning to move outside of your room into your home and neighborhood, and putting a few faces together, the people around you, extending even further out into your town or the country around you. And if you want to take your hand off your heart, if it's a distraction, but just begin to feel that heart space blossoming and touching other people's heart space, extending all across this country and up into Canada and down into Mexico and down into South America and all the way around the globe. 7.89 billion people last time I checked a few days ago with the same heartbeat. And then beginning to actually move your mind up into the atmosphere. So starting to just feel into the blue sky above. If it's dark or dusk, maybe it's a purple sky. And rising up, up, up through the atmosphere, out into space. Maybe you see Neowise close up, the planets, the moon, the sun. And then begin to move out into the edge of space, out to the edge of the universe, as far as your mind's eye can reach. And just look back, wherever back is. And like, you can't even really see the earth, right? It's just like a little speck, a little smote of dust, as Carl Sagan says. And then however you'd like, come back through those stars, all the way back into your space. Feel the air on your skin. Feel your sits bones rooted on the surface that you're seated. The crown extending towards that sky, that vast sky. So vast we can't even figure out where the edge is. It's too big for our human minds. And then just let your ears listen to this little poem. She burned all that was no longer serving her. She burned the lies she told herself and the truths she was running from. She burned the fading hopes and threw the strings of her attachments into the fire. She burned all that was not soul, and she was left standing with the moon. Don't forget, sweet sister, La Luna said, you are of me. You will wax and wane, change and transform, shine bright and go dark. This too shall pass. Be patient, practice, and all is coming. You will wax and wane, change and transform, shine bright and go dark. This too shall pass. Be patient, practice, and all is coming. So we'll just take a moment here to dedicate the merit of our practice. May all beings be happy and free. May all beings live with peace and in ease. May all beings be healthy and well. And you can extend that to any person or groups of people that you know are suffering. And when all of that feels good and complete for you, then blinking open your eyes if they're closed. Thank you so much for joining me, for leaning into uncertainty and change, for being willing to hear some of the sources of that suffering and some of the antidotes. I appreciate each one of you. So just really quickly, I'm going to once again plug the intensive, because that's sort of like what we just did here. We'll be teaching how to have a really solid meditation practice in order to create that space, in order to live an aligned life that's helpful and kind, and an amplified life. So all of the shit that we all experience, that we have the tools to work with it so that we can show up in profound ways for the people around us who desperately need us to do so. And then you won't only get blah blahed to death by me. We have a lot of amazing guest teachers that will teach you all sorts of things about the science of meditation, about how to become a teacher if that's something that interests you, and things to put in your body, things not to put in your body. It's pretty amazing training, and I would love for each of you to join.